The Kavanaugh scandal goes way beyond sex and really needs a serious investigation. We're talking about crimes like torture. Check this out, and don't forget, ding the bell, subscribe, comment, and share. This is getting interesting, and it's one small piece of a larger issue, frankly. But just to keep focused on Kavanaugh for just a moment, everybody's talking about, you know, another woman has come forward, another guy who went to college with Kavanaugh has come forward and said, yeah, he's pulling down his pants and exposing himself in front of women at parties. Apparently, there's like 2 now corroborated, confirmed, multiple witnesses events like this. And that's certainly unseemly behavior, illegal behavior, you know, by today's standards, horrible behavior, by the standards of 20 years ago, inappropriate behavior, you know, for this sort of thing. And, you know, worthy of being condemned. And that may be what takes him down, which would be fine with me. I mean, you know, they went after Bill Clinton for getting it on with Monica Lewinsky. But there are other issues that are being completely eclipsed by this that I think are at least as important, that have to do with Brett Kavanaugh. First of all, he worked for George W. Bush. This is a guy who had never actually practiced law as a lawyer, to the best of my knowledge. Maybe if he did, it was very briefly. Basically, he worked for George W. Bush for years in the Bush White House, apparently working on torture and war and things that apparently would reflect so badly on him that the Republicans literally would not allow any of the hundreds of thousands of documents from his time at the Bush administration to even be examined by Democrats on the Senate Judiciary Committee that was, you know, overseeing and recommending his appointment as a Supreme Court justice. So, number one, we don't know to what extent Brett Kavanaugh enabled war crimes. War crimes that led to the death of hundreds of thousands of Iraqis, the displacement of over 5 million Iraqis, the torture of numerous Iraqis that, when it was photographed at Abu Ghraib and those pictures went around the world, devastated the world's opinion of the United States. Now, Brett Kavanaugh may have been the lone voice opposing this in the Bush administration, for all we know. I mean, we have no idea, or he might have been a cheerleader for it. But the media is not discussing this. It's almost like, well, you know, they really don't like to discuss the possibility of, you know, Brett Kavanaugh or anybody else basically being a war criminal. And you know, this is serious stuff. I mean, this is serious stuff. And frankly, we need to be looking at this. You know, this Kavanaugh scandal goes way beyond just a sex scandal. I mean, way beyond just a sex scandal. So we have that, number one. Number two, you have this question of what happened to his debt. Brett Kavanaugh was apparently hundreds of thousands, at least $100,000 in credit card debt, which is, I mean, how many credit cards do you have to have? Typically, you know, lines of credit on a credit card are $10,000, $20,000, maybe $30,000 at the top end. How many credit cards did he have, and how much debt did he have, and where did that debt come from? I mean, there, you know, is it gambling debts? Is it drinking debts? Is he paying for furniture for his house on his? I mean, well, we weren't allowed to look into that either. Or who paid off his debt in the months before he went before the Senate? Who does this guy owe his loyalty to? Was it a bribe? Was it a payoff? We don't know. I mean, and finally, Brett Kavanaugh, the only reason that Donald Trump was able to put him on the Supreme Court was because Justice Kennedy, who was apparently fit as a fiddle. I mean, you see him at, you know, when he retired, and he's just, I mean, he looks like he's just great. He's in great shape. Decided to retire. And he decided to retire at about the same time that the news reports were coming out that it was his son, Justin Kennedy, who was in charge of the real estate lending division of Deutsche Bank, who may have been overseeing the loans to Donald Trump and his companies. So did Kennedy leave to create a space for Kavanaugh because of political pressure? Did Kennedy leave to create a space for Kavanaugh because he was concerned about his son being outed? Elizabeth Warren just introduced legislation. Actually, she's doing it today. She's going down to New York City, to Manhattan, to the place where the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire was. And as I recall, 1909, you had a bunch of people who died, virtually all of them women who were working, garment workers, young women. Some of them jumping out windows to their death because they were locked in order to force them to work. I mean, this was one of the major things that led to the effort to unionize workers in the United States. The GM, UAW going on strike today, by the way, nationwide, 50,000 people. But anyhow, and I'm going to tie this back to Kavanaugh. Elizabeth Warren is laying out an anti-corruption plan, and part of it is that federal judges cannot stop an investigation into their ethics just by resigning. Now, I had no idea that this loophole was even in the law. But it turns out that if a federal judge is being investigated ethically, if there's ethics investigations into a federal judge and they want to stop the investigation, all they have to do is resign. It's what Trump's sister did when the New York Times reported that Trump and his sister, and apparently other of his siblings, committed a massive multi-hundred-million-dollar tax fraud in order to get more of what in today's dollars would be over $1 billion from his daddy, to avoid paying taxes on it. And so Elizabeth Warren is saying, hey, let's stop this. Well, those anti-corruption measures that Elizabeth Warren is proposing may well also focus on Brett Kavanaugh. But, the bottom line is we really don't know. We don't know about his school behavior because it wasn't investigated. The young woman who came forward, not Christine Blasey Ford, but, Ms. Ramirez, who came forward and said, yeah, he exposed himself to me too. The FBI was apparently told, don't even talk to the people who might corroborate her testimony. FBI agents came out and said, we've been stopped from doing this. By whom? I mean, there's a lot more to this Kavanaugh scandal, to this guy that Cory Gardner and Susan Collins and pretty much all the other, it was a 50 to 48 vote, right? All Republicans voting for Kavanaugh, all Democrats voting against him. Excuse me, all of the votes for him were Republicans. There were 2 people who didn't vote, and I don't recall exactly when that happened. One of them might have been dead John McCain. But in any case, Cory Gardner and Susan Collins, this is going to be an issue in their campaigns. But I think that this is much bigger than just Brett Kavanaugh exposing himself to people.